All right. Okay, so that's your call, everybody. What up, y'all? Smalls here. I'm coming to you from Chumash and Tongvaland, otherwise known as Southern California. And I just want to welcome everybody to the intersection of Black and Sick. Now, before we get started, and before we welcome and introduce our guest and get into today's conversation, I want to begin, as always, by grounding today's topic and conversation in who we are at Black and Sick and why this space exists, right? So, with roots in India's late 15th century Punjab, Sikhi was founded during a time of deep political corruption, religious violence, caste oppression, and economic exploitation. This was the backdrop against which our founding guru, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, began teaching the principles of Sikhi, declaring there is no Hindu, there is no Muslim, only one shared humanity, united under one divine. The foundation of this faith, the core of Sikhi, is justice, equality, selfless service, or seva, and the sacred duty to resist all forms of oppression. From langar to seva to dying for the right to religious freedom, the Sikh tradition has always required us to stand 10 toes down on the front lines of the fight for liberation. See, our gurus taught us spirituality is inseparable from social responsibility. So for Sikhs, justice isn't optional, it's sacred. And our ancestors, our Black American ancestors, taught us that none of us are free until all of us are free. And that is why, even when the topics we address here at Black and Sick aren't explicitly about Sikhi or positioned squarely at the intersection of culture and faith, they are still deeply Sikh in spirit. In the face of systemic racism, white supremacy, religious discrimination, state violence, and economic injustice, our commitment to Sarbat Dabala, or the welfare of all, compels us to speak, to act, and to stand in solidarity. So we draw a direct line between the world Guru Nanak challenged, one marked by fear, division, and abuse of power, and the one we're living in today, especially here in the US. And as one of our favorite queer icons, Angelica Ross, said, the admission price for community is accountability. You can't claim pride and membership to a community that you refuse to be accountable to. So if you're here for deep conversations, truth-telling, and collective action through the lens of Sikhi, and at the intersection of culture and faith, then you're in the right place. And we're about to get into it right now. All right. So today's topic, yesterday was Juneteenth and World Sickle Cell Day. And I'm not sure, Juneteenth has been a thing for a while. World Sickle Cell Day has been a thing for a while. And I'm not sure why I never connected the dots that they fall on the same day. I'm not sure. It seems like one year I'm totally focused on sickle cell advocacy, and another year I'm like, oh, let's do something for Juneteenth. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized they fall on the same day. And to me, that feels like kismet. Like it feels like it was meant to be, though I don't think it was intentional. I don't think the people, because World Sickle Cell Day came second, I'm not sure that the people who fought for it to become a thing even knew that Juneteenth was on the 19th, right? Because it's World Sickle Cell Day. It's a global phenomenon. Juneteenth is specifically something celebrated here in the US. And speaking of that, today's question, the question of the stream today is, should Juneteenth be a federal holiday? And I think like most people would probably say, well, yes, of course, or at least that's what I'm sort of assuming. I don't know, maybe you think it's not. And you might be surprised by my answer, but we're going to ask our guests if they think that Juneteenth should be a federal holiday, or should it be maybe something that's just celebrated, amongst those who want to celebrate it. I think the major distinction of it being a federal holiday is that if you are a government worker, you get the day off. And I believe it's a paid day off. I think, I'm not 100% sure. Never been a government worker. And then that usually, a lot of other jobs and businesses and companies usually acknowledge or observe federal holidays as well for their employees. So I think that's the main distinction. But we'll see. Anyways, that's my question for today's guest, among the other many questions that we're going to ask them. But should Juneteenth be a federal holiday? Yeah. So we're going to get started. We're mostly going to focus on sickle cell today. And I think you'll see why. I think it's important. We've been talking a lot about advocacy and the importance of advocacy and what it has to do with Sikhi. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper. And I think the perfect topic for that is sickle cell. And so if you're wondering why we're covering these topics today, it's because we have a lot of important people in today's conversation and they are busy. And so this is when we could get it scheduled. This is when it made the most sense for everybody. And so even though Juneteenth was yesterday, we are celebrating it today. So let's bring on our first guest if you guys are ready. I was trying to think when I was like trying to write this, produce this episode in my head. I think I got a little cocky, first of all, because I was like, sickle cell, I could talk about that in my sleep. Like, what are you saying? Like, I don't need notes. I don't need to write anything down. I'm just going to wing it. And then like a few hours ago, I was like, maybe don't do that. Maybe that's a dumb idea. Maybe let's not do that. It sounds goofy. And so I started taking notes, and I was trying to think of like, what's the best story to tell to introduce our guest. And I couldn't pick one. I could not pick one. But I will tell you guys about the most recent interaction, encounter sounds really weird, but like interaction that I had with our first guest. We were at sickle cell camp last year, and she was running one of the activities that we do, which is, sort of like an education thing. Like, I'm trying to think of the right word, because it's not like school, so I don't want to say like period or block. But anyways, during sickle cell camp, we always do some educational part of the camp. Like, it's supposed to be fun and games, and it's great, and it's definitely geared towards kids with sickle cell, but they always want to have an educational component. And when I saw the agenda, I saw that she was the person in charge of the educational component. And immediately I was like, yes, that is the correct answer. That is the absolute correct choice. Because I don't think that there's anybody else who should be running the education portion for really anything besides this person, besides Cassandra Trimnell, or who I call Cass, right? And it's mainly because, like, I'm trying to, let me put this in the right words. Like, my standards, right? Like, my expectations are really high. And I don't mean that in a way like I'm bragging. It's like a thing I'm working on in therapy, right? It's like a thing that is from my mom. I used to tell people, my mom, I was sort of raised like I was raised by like an immigrant parent, except she's not actually an immigrant, right? But like, standards, expectations so high. I'm working on it. But despite the fact that I'm working on it and I know that I need to bring them down, Cass and Sickle Cell 101, they far exceed my expectations on a very regular basis. I mean, from the moment they started operating in the sickle cell space years ago, I was impressed, right? One of the critiques and complaints that I've always had about the advocacy within our community, and there's been many, is just like the lack of professionalism, like, images in like social media. It wasn't like it didn't look professional. It looked like somebody's uncle's cousin made it real quick on like Microsoft Paint in their mom's basement type, but like everything she did, everything Sickle Cell 101 did was top notch. It was professional. It was on point. It was accessible. You guys know how much accessibility is important to me. It was accessible and it was accurate, right? And so the education that she's done around sickle cell, the awareness, the advocacy that she's done around sickle cell is so impressive. And I truly believe that Sickle Cell 101 is the top, like the premier advocacy group in the sickle cell space. I mean, far above the national organization. No shade to them. They've had a lot of changes in the last few years, so they're probably doing amazing things. But just every now and then when I peek my head back into social media, I'm like, yeah, Sickle Cell 101 still doing a damn thing. And they're doing well when you come across people you've never met, you haven't even talked to, and they mention Sickle Cell 101. They name drop Cass, right? That's how you know you're doing the damn thing. And so I really just want to welcome you and introduce you guys to, hands down, my favorite advocacy in the sickle cell space, Cass Trimnell. What's up? How you doing? Introduce yourself to the people.
Hello. Oh my gosh. You're making me blush over here.
Well
I'm
deserved.
I'm Cass Trimnell. I'm a founder and executive director of Sickle Cell 101, and we're a US-based advocacy organization that connects, educates, empowers the global sickle cell community. And we do this through targeted digital engagement and data-driven initiatives. Um, in addition to my role as a patient advocate. Um, and I it's one thing sharing your story, but I realize that the community needs to be represented as well. And so I try and embody, and take what I learn and what I hear from the community and make sure it gets to the right people. And I'm someone living with sickle cell, as Small said. What else can I tell you? I created Sickle Cell 101, I think it was 12 years ago. And just recognize there's this huge need for easily accessible. You said the word accessible. And this is how I know we live on the same. I told her earlier, we live on the same wavelength. I think everything you said about standards and everything, I'm trying to work on that too. Um, but the goal is for this to be easily accessible in every way that you can think about accessibility. And education that helps provide information for people to better manage their sickle cell. And I saw an opportunity to leverage my background and training and to provide, just this desperately needed resource at the time. And now 12 years later, we still do the same thing. We have the most comprehensive digital platforms tailored to sickle cell patient education and generation of real time and community insights. And we reach, I'd say, probably about 3 million people on an annual basis. They originate in 130 countries, and 75% of them are individuals living with sickle cell. So it's really cool. We're really speaking to our audience, right? We're really getting to the people that need this information, but there's still a lot of work to do. So thank you so much for the wonderful intro. I admire Smalls's work, and I don't remember when we met, but I'm happy we've known each other for a while now. I
Long
feel.
time. Yeah. It's been a minute, and I know I focused a lot on like the professionalism and the presentation, and I think that that's important, right? Because if it doesn't look legit, if it looks like it was made on Microsoft Paint back in 1882, right? Like people tend not to pay attention to it, and we already have a hard enough time getting people to pay attention and take it seriously, and so forth and so on. And so, but it's not just that, because I think perhaps I know that my biggest frustration within the advocacy space, particularly within the sickle cell community, I can't speak to other communities, but specifically within the sickle cell community, is folks shying away from the racial disparity aspect, the social justice component, that factor, and the fact that not exclusively, but most of the people in the U.S. who have sickle cell are Black. And so that has impacted everything, right? A lot of people will say, like, why are you so obsessed with race? Or why are you focusing on race? Or why are we talking about race? Or I'm colorblind, I don't see color. And that's great in a like an idealistic world. But the reality is, race is a factor in just about every aspect of life. And of course, that includes medicine. That's why we have medical apartheid. And it's why I always share the book Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. And so I've just found that was a topic that I realized very early on, like very young, was it was a factor. It was an important factor, perhaps even the most important factor given our US healthcare system. But it was a factor. It was a topic a lot of people didn't want to talk about. They didn't want to cover it. They didn't want to address it. And if they did, they were kind of tiptoeing around it. And I tended to be the one in the space that was like, okay, time out. Wait a minute. No, listen, and that has gotten me into some hot water, whatever you want to call it. But I love that you don't shy away from it, and I love how you handle it, right? Because I know that I can come in and be like, we need to talk about this right now. This isn't like, that's very much me, right? Cass got the finesse though. Cass got the finesse that I wish I had, right? And so when I'm watching the content from Sickle Cell 101, when I'm watching the live streams and the way that you guys address it and the people that you bring on, I was watching one with Dr. Z. I think his name is Dr. Amar Zahidi, I believe. And I just love that the way you did it. I love the way you handle it. And so that's another aspect. That's another reason that I think Sickle Cell 101 is the top organization, because I just don't think that you can have. And I did a workshop on this years ago at one of our conferences. I did a talk on this where I said, I don't think that you can really have full, effective, thorough advocacy without addressing the social justice aspect. I just don't think it's possible. You're just missing a huge component. Because the fact of the matter is, when you talk to most people with sickle cell, even the ones who aren't Black will tell you that it impacts them, even to the point where they sometimes have to convince people that they have sickle cell because there's this assumption that it's a Black disease. So it impacts everybody in the community. And so we really have to address it. And we're going to do more, and we're going to dive deeper into that in part 2, which is going to be next week. I'm also excited about that one. But yeah, I just love the way you do it. You handle it with finesse. The number of times I've been told by somebody, like, you're radical. You're the most radical person I know. And like, it kind of feels like a compliment, but low key, it doesn't. It feels like, wow, calm down. I don't know. But I'm saying that to say, like, I can acknowledge that there's some room for improvement in that way. But also that there's room for every different type of advocate. And as much as Cass and I are on the same wavelength a lot, I see the stuff that she does and I'm like, yep, I had that idea, or that's what I would have done, or yep. We're two different type of advocates, I would say. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think we're different. Like, we are on the same wavelength. We have different approaches because we have different personalities and we're different people, right? And so 1 year, see, and this is I feel like this entire episode is going to be me just like fangirling out, right, about Sickle Cell 101, because you guys know sickle cell advocacy is my favorite topic, my favorite thing to talk about. But The other really important thing that you guys do really well, I think better than anybody, is the social media engagement. You guys do that so well. And I have a amazing example. Well, I have the results of an amazing example. One year, you created a post that encouraged people to respond to "You know you have sickle cell when." If you remember that one.
Yes.
So you got Sickle Cell 101 made this post, and you have sickle cell when, and everybody responded. And even me, somebody who's like never on social media, even I was like, oh, I got some responses. Oh, I got some responses, right? And that eventually turned into a project. I'm not sure if you know this, Cass, but Ironwood Pharmaceuticals reached out to me and was like, hey, we want to do a project for Sickle Cell Awareness Month. Do you have any ideas? What do you want to do? And I'm talking to Holly. Holly John is another awesome advocate in the space. And I was like, and we just through conversation, I'm not exactly sure how it came about, but I just wanted a way to show people all of the responses that you got from that prompt, that you have sickle cell when, that you got from that prompt. And this is the result. I'm only going to show the trailer just because we're short on time, but I very much credit Cass for this. Let's see. Sound on. All right, let's try this again.
I saw the 30-second pink salt trick in a viral video.
Not an ad. YouTube be coming for me. They really, oh snap. They really want me to get YouTube Premium, and I refuse. I'm not doing it. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's try this again. So remember, this is where we were at. I saw a post on social media, and it wasn't exactly the post that inspired it. It was the prompt, but it was the responses from everybody in the community. And I saw such a wide variety of responses, and I was like, oh my goodness, so true. And it really emphasized the point that like everybody has a different experience with sickle cell. And we'll get into what sickle cell is in a little bit, but here we go.
You know you have sickle cell when you look completely healthy, but you're in a full pain crisis, and you push through your everyday routine like there's nothing wrong. Like right now.
You have sickle cell when your doctors break your port, which is going to be my third. And if this one doesn't work, I'm not going to get another one. Because I've had so many surgeries. And
There you go.
Okay, it would help if I unmuted myself. All right, so that project, it's one of my favorites, right? It's absolutely one of my favorites. I use it as like a proof of concept thing to show other people if I'm doing other type of advocacy offline, since that's the type of advocacy I really prefer. But that was inspired by the work that you guys do at Sickle Cell 101, because you're so good at community engagement. You're so good at social media engagement. Can you speak to that a little bit? First of all, what prompted you to start Sickle Cell 101? Because let me just say this. I was given the advice one year, like somebody was talking about, like, we don't need a ton of organizations. Like sometimes if you have an idea or you want to help a community, the best idea may not be to start your own foundation or start your own organization. It might be to just help ones that are already there, right? To sort of like pool our resources. And that's an issue that I've seen in the sickle cell community time and time again, where everybody has a foundation and there's like very few resources going to, being spread very thin. Whereas like if we came together, we might do better, right? But then Sickle Cell 101 came, and I was like, yeah, no, y'all should exist. You need to exist. So what prompted that? What inspired you or pushed you to create Sickle Cell 101? Tell us a little bit about that, and then talk to us a little bit about the social media engagement and the community engagement, and how you guys do that so well, why you do it so well.
Oh, thank you. I think, Sickle Cell 101 came about in my journey to try and understand the disease or the disorder that I live with better. I, at the time, was a bio major in college, and I went in being a bio major because I thought I had a leg up. I was trying to cheat. And, because you grow up, and I grew up, I should say, I grew up privileged in, what good looks like for a patient, right? And that's, comprehensive care, great doctors, access to hematologists and all of that. And so I was pretty situated, got a lot of information and education through care. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be a bio major because I already know half of this stuff. And went in, thinking I'll learn a lot more about sickle cell, and found that I didn't learn much more. Sickle cell was referred to, I don't know if you remember Mendel's peas, where, they had the green peas and the yellow peas, and, that's how genes are passed down. And that's when sickle cell was brought up. And that was the only time sickle cell was brought up, when I was a bio major. And so I started learning more on my own and started doing my own research. And I'm like, well, if I don't know, how many other people don't know? At the time, Instagram was the big platform. And this was the time when Instagram was like, the pictures, the mountains, and, like people posting the scenic pictures with the filters on it. And I found a community on Instagram. And so I started putting facts out there, and I really wanted it to be holistic. I wanted it to be not just information, but, what lifestyle could look like, food, energy, like, quotes, affirmations, all of that kind of just packaged into one. And so I think in a way I was creating something that I wish I had. It was just me and my sister growing up with sickle cell. I didn't know anybody else growing up with sickle cell. And then, I feel like I only really met people in my adulthood with sickle cell. And so I think I created what I needed in a way. And, and the rest is history.
Yep.
I think that's also why engagement is does well, because it's from us, by us.
Yes.
And, a lot of people have a lot of different things, but we always try and be as collaborative as possible and bring in as many voices as possible. And, so it's not just me, but, just really represented. It's supposed to be a mirror to the community. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's so much that I could say about that, but I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm gonna again rein in my fangirling, and keep it pretty concise. But one, yes, to not knowing many other people with sickle cell growing up, same, right? And then for creating the thing that you needed, that's something that I've tried to live by, right? I first heard that years ago. If you don't see a thing, I've heard it in the form of books. If there's a book that you need or that you want to read and it doesn't exist, then you need to write it. Or if there's a thing that you need that doesn't exist, then you need to create it. And that's why Black and Sick exists. And so I think it's a really powerful sentiment, and I think it's absolutely true, right? The flip side of that is that sometimes you're not always the best person to do the thing, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't pursue it in some way. Either that's get the skills that you need, link up with somebody that does have the experience. And speaking of that, because we have our next guest coming in to join the conversation in just a bit, but we sort of have like a doctor in common. So speaking of, if you don't necessarily have the certain expertise, link up with the people that you do. I remember the first time I saw Dr. Q, I think that's what most people call him. I call him Dr. Carollo, my pediatric hematologist. And I always say that, like, that dude messed me up because he set the standard for me in terms of sickle cell care. And then he sent me out into the world at a big 17 thinking, oh, this is how it is. This is the standard across the board. This is the treatment that everybody gets. Because again, don't know other sickle cell patients, right? And I'm going to Children's Hospital Oakland, which is one of the top places for research and for sickle cell treatment and care. And they sort of lead the way. And for those who don't know, my mom is very involved in the sickle cell community. I think at this point, possibly even more so than me. It's why I got involved so early. From the moment that she found out that I was diagnosed at 2 days old, she just, again, I told you guys the kind of childhood I had, right? Like the expectations. So she kind of went in head first and was like, oh, I need to know everything and I need to know it right now, right? And so that's very much who she was. And we were at a different hospital and we moved to Children's Hospital, and Dr. Carollo was there and Dr. Vachinsky. And so they have amazing amazing professionals there at Children's Hospital. And my mom was actually on the committee to sort of set the standards for ER care. So if a sickle cell patient comes into the ER at Children's Hospital, what do you do? What's the protocol? You do this is how you, and that whole thing, my mom was on the committee to help create those standards, right? This was years ago. And so I'm just trying to give you guys the context for like the standard of care, the expectations that I had. And then at 17, I leave home to go to college, start college in New Orleans. Hurricane Katrina hits. I end up in Arkansas. For the next, I don't know how many years, it was just like, I mean, you're talking about a culture shock. The standard of care, not only was it worse, it didn't exist almost, right? Like the number of doctors who didn't know what sickle cell was or barely knew it or told me I had been misdiagnosed because they'd never seen SC type before. And so they told me I had the trait and I couldn't possibly be in pain because, you know, with the trait, you don't have symptoms. Like it was wild, right? And so Dr. Carolla really set the standard for care and treatment. And I really want to get into how important it is for us to have advocates in the space, but not just patient advocates, for the doctors who treat us, for the physicians, for the nurses, for medical professionals in general, to really not stop sickle cell care and treatment at the hospital, right? But to be advocates for it in a much larger context, right? And that's why I chose the guests that I chose, because these are all people that I've seen do that in various ways. And so I want you to talk to us a little bit or speak to what made you team up with Dr. Q? What made you, start that sort of Ask a Expert segment or yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Keith Carolla was such a resource to me. He was such a wealth of information. And I'm like, felt so lucky to have him that I wanted to share him with everybody, right? And he, to this day, we were on live 6 hours yesterday for Ask the Experts for World Sickle Cell Day. And he's still knocking out those sickle cell questions. And, you know, when you have something so good, you want to share it with, and you think about what people don't have, right? And you want to make sure that there's access there, right? And he has the same idea of being able to provide, high quality information to people. And so it was a natural fit. And he, Dr. Q, funny story, he actually didn't transition me out of pediatric until I got pregnant with my daughter. And that was like 20, I think I was 25.
Lucky you.
He's like, okay, well, since you're having a baby, you got to go to adult care.
Time to go hang out with the big kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me though. That doesn't surprise me. Like if I hadn't gone away to college, I think the same thing would have happened because we talked about even when I would come back on breaks or whatever, I was still seeing Dr. Carolla. And I was actually just telling Kay Michelle, who's our live producer for the show and for Black and Sick. I was just telling, like, a lot of people don't realize this, but with sickle cell, it affects this is what I tell people, it affects any part of your body that needs blood, like just about, right? And so we tend to see a lot of specialists. And this is the first time, and we'll talk to this guest next week, but this is the first time where I've had a primary care physician, because all of the doctors that I've seen for the most part have been specialists of some sort, usually my hematologist. And that was Dr. Q for the longest. So that doesn't surprise me. That's the type of doctor he is. I heard Dr. Z say the same thing, that sometimes he hangs on to his pediatric patients for a long time, for as long as he can. And we love and appreciate doctors like that, because very often, and even now, I changed doctors a couple of years ago, and I did so begrudgingly. I've lived in Southern California for 10 years, going on 11, and I was still seeing my doctor in the Bay Area until a couple of years ago. And that was because I was so scared to change doctors. Like, the chances of getting a not great medical professional, not great physician, and not great hematologist are so high that I was like, well, the one I have isn't great, but I mean, he's not terrible. He's not, some of the stories I've heard and the experiences I've seen. And so as we bring on our next guest to join this conversation, I really just want to highlight the importance of having these doctors. And I feel the same way that Dr. Z and Dr. Q feel, and that you feel, Cass, because there's so often I hear people tell stories. Like there was a guy from Baton Rouge who was like, oh, I have to drive a couple hours to see the only hematologist that takes sickle cell patients in the state, or in a this many 1,000-mile radius, or like, it's just kind of mind blowing. And so often, and even recently, now that I've gotten this amazing medical team, that's what I call a medical team, because we have to see so many specialists, I just want to be like, can you see this person though? Okay, I know they're in Michigan, but is there a way that you can treat them? Because it's not great out there. I know they're there, but I wish we could share our doctors with the world, because, or at least the other patients in the US, because it's rough out there a lot. It's rough. But let's bring on our next guest. This is Dr. Mary Sehl, hematologist-oncologist at UCLA. And like I told y'all, a couple years ago, I changed doctors, which and I changed insurance, and so I changed my medical team. Like everybody had to change, right? And I was always very wary, and I'm always like, how much are they gonna know about sickle cell? Because I told you guys, sometimes I'm trying to have to, I have to educate them, and or sometimes they just don't have the compassion, or they kind of just like, they do their job. There's a lot of, for folks who don't know, there are a lot of hematologists, oncologists who either treat sickle cell patients by default or begrudgingly, or because they have to, because it's, sort of under their wheelhouse. But there are some like who really don't. I've had a doctor who says, I'm not comfortable seeing sickle cell patients. And that was a hematologist oncologist, right? And then there are some doctors who go and do fellowships and learn more about sickle cell, or who run clinical trials, or who involve themselves in research and really just go the extra mile. And this is one such doctor, Dr. Mary Sehl. I met her not too long ago, talking about clinical trials. And again, I'm very wary of clinical trials. I don't just sign up and say yes to any and every clinical trial. I really have to understand the science, at least to some aspect. But more importantly, I have to trust the physicians involved, the medical professionals involved. And after meeting Dr. Sehl for the first time, I did. And that's saying a lot. And so I want to welcome you guys to Dr. Mary Sehl. If you could introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be part of this discussion. I appreciate you allowing me to listen in and to participate. I'm a hematologist at UCLA. I joined the faculty in 2009 and did my fellowship prior to that at UCLA. I've been seeing sickle cell patients since joining the faculty in 2009, but we started building our program about 5 years ago, using a hub and spoke model, where our hub is within the university hospital and clinics, and we have satellite clinics in different locations in the greater Los Angeles area. And so we're very excited to interact with you and to be part of this discussion.
Absolutely. So if I could just ask, why sickle cell? Why did you get involved with sickle cell? Because again, there are some hematologists, oncologists who don't do it, who again will do the bare minimum. And yet, from the research that I've done, you are involved in research, and I know that you're involved in clinical trials. So, what made you decide to get involved in sickle cell and really partake in the community in that way?
Well, I had great mentors. My fellowship began in 2004, and at the time, I was mentored by both Dr. Gary Schiller, who runs the stem cell transplant program, and Dr. Victor Martyr, who was an expert in hemostasis and thrombosis and had a busy practice with sickle cell patients as well as hemophilia patients. And I started to shadow him in his clinic even after my fellowship was done. Dr. Martyr had a great compassion for his patients. He was seeing patients towards the end of his life, and even when he became ill himself, he continued to interact with his patients, because it was really part of his identity was giving care to patients. And I was very inspired by the way he interacted with patients and provided compassionate care. And right around that time, when I started to shadow him as a faculty member in 2013, 2014, there were clinical trials starting in gene therapy. At the time, it was really in the preclinical phase and translational phase. So in the laboratory of Dr. Donald Cohn at UCLA, who's in peds heme, there was a lot of excitement about the beginning of these trials. So I started as a team member in consenting patients to donate bone marrow to this study, donate blood, donate their time. And I was very inspired by the patients I saw who were generously giving their time to participate, really, for something that was just mainly to advance science. And to go through something that's as invasive as a bone marrow biopsy for the purposes of helping advance our understanding was very inspiring. And so I've been working together with Dr. Cohn and Dr. Gary Schiller on these trials, and it's been very rewarding to see that type of therapy now being moved into the approved clinical space where we can offer it to patients, even if it's not in the setting of a clinical trial.
For sure, for sure. Something I want to me that really speaks to, you spoke, when I asked kind of why you got into sickle cell care and research, and you spoke about having a mentor or a colleague, really, which to me, again, speaks to the importance of having advocates and having professionals in this space, right? The number of times I've had a nurse advocate for me, to a doctor who maybe in the ER who doesn't fully understand, or, who can tell like my blood pressure's still sky high and the meds they're giving me, I've had medical professionals advocate for me in those really important ways. And so I want to ask, this is a two-pronged question. So this is both for Cass, and then there's a part for Dr. Sehl, because one of the other things that I really want to do and I'm trying to do is sort of bridge the gap between medical professionals and patients. And so what I mean by that is, the way that I look at it, whenever I'm in the hospital, I'm trying to be my nurse's favorite patient, right? Like when I hit the call button, I don't want them to be like, oh, room 442 again, right? Like I want them to be like, oh, cool. And so I do that in a number of ways, right? But and I've had it so that like sometimes nurses will come and like sneak in my room and we'll be talking for like 20 minutes about something we shouldn't be, when they should probably go be doing something else. But I always want to be my nurse's favorite patient. I want to make their job easy. Because I trust them, right? And also because my care is in their hands. And again, they are my advocates. The doctors often come see you for a couple minutes, and it's the nurses who are there caring for you minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, depending on how long you're in the hospital. And the same is true for doctors. And this is something I've talked to, we have a guest coming next week, Dr. Patel. This is something that I've spoken to her about as well. So Cass, what are you looking for in doctors, physicians, care providers, but also just like medical professionals who are advocates in the space? Like, what are you looking for? What do you need from them? So what are you looking for in terms of like, how do you know that you can trust this one, that this is going to be a great care provider? And then what do you need from those same medical professionals as advocates in the space? And then the same question, but the flip side for Dr. Sehl, what are you looking for in terms of patients? Like, are there red flags, or are there things that, you kind of wish patients knew that they don't know? Or like, what's your ideal patient? Like, what are you looking for in terms of, I guess, your ideal patient? And then Cass, what are you looking for in terms of, knowing that you can trust a particular care provider or medical professional? And what do you need from them as advocates? Either one of you guys can start.
Well, if you don't mind me starting, there are so few adult specialists within sickle cell, and everybody wants a hematologist that is a sickle cell expert, but there are so little, or there are so few, that we need to go outside of that specialty and find doctors who can just really advocate for you on your behalf. And a great example is somebody we've already talked about, Dr. Keith Carollo. He's a pediatrician. He's not even a hematologist, but he will wake up in the middle of the night and call the ER on my behalf, right? And so I think the goal for a lot of patients is to find a hematologist or to find a sickle cell specialist. My advice would be just to find someone who's willing to go to bat for you, someone who's willing to listen to you, someone who's willing to learn. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to just be willing to look up what are the current therapies out there, right? And what's in the pipeline right now. So to me, just within being an advocate, that's what I've come to realize is, just finding somebody who you can, because you said your life is in their hands, right? And so somebody willing to go to bat for you.
Yeah, that's so important. It's something that I know I consider, but I don't think I've ever thought about it explicitly, right? And that's so true. Dr. Q, I mean, Dr. Q diagnosed me from New Orleans, like he's in Oakland or wherever he lives because it was the middle of the night, right? And I'm in New Orleans in the ER. They can't figure out what's wrong. This is when I had my gallbladder out, right? They don't know what's wrong. They don't know why I'm doubled over in pain. And my mom kind of calls him in a panic. He answers the phone or calls back. I think she paged him. He calls back in the middle of the night, listens to my symptoms and goes, "Oh, sounds like gallbladder. Okay, this is what you tell them," right? And then just ran it down. And the doctors were like, what happened here? Anyways, yes, I absolutely. And I think that's so important. So it's not necessarily somebody who has the most knowledge about sickle cell or somebody who has all the latest research and all the stats and all the facts, but it's somebody who cares enough to go the extra mile, or maybe not even the extra mile, but like go to bat and really care about you as a patient and as a person, as a human. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dr. Sehl, what about you? What are you looking for? What's your experience? What are you looking for in terms of like your ideal patient, or anything that you worry about, or what do you wish patients would know, or anything like that?
Yeah, I have to say, I was talking about mentoring before, but when I think about my strongest mentors, they've been my patients. I've seen patients who have really taught me the most.
Uh-oh. I thought it was me.
Oh, I lost you for a second.
Yeah, you frozen for a second. Okay, I think we're good.
So a few of my patients are advocates for other patients. And so when a lot of times when I'll see them in clinic or when I'll see them in the hospital, they'll go through a list of things that to make sure I'm aware of everything. And it's very helpful. I think, sometimes my patients are present at meetings and invite me to a meeting. And then I can hear at those types of meetings what the patients feel when they're in the hospital. And so, one-on-one, you can learn a lot from a patient, but also joining in a meeting where patients and advocates are interacting and sort of being a fly on a wall and listening to what they're saying, what are their perceptions that I don't always get to hear directly, is very helpful. I think, any patient who asks a question, whether it's a clinical question or a research question, that advances both their care and the field in general. So a lot of times physician scientists will say our best research questions come from the patient. If a patient says, I just went through this therapy and I'm very happy you helped me, but now I'm having this new problem that's from the therapy. That's how we advance our scientific questions and the care of patients. So I think patients who ask questions are very helpful.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like patients, I'm always saying this, you can tell me if I'm sort of on track. I'm always telling like other patients, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, don't be afraid to speak up. So often, folks, especially if they feel like maybe they don't understand or there's a little insecurity around like the science or something, they will just listen to whatever the doctor says, or they'll just take it. Or and I always tell them, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to push back. Don't be afraid to say like, well, how did you get to that instead of this, or why this and not that, or what does this mean, or can you explain the difference between pneumonia and acute chest syndrome, or whatever the case may be. So it sounds like sort of like that's what you're saying, like don't be afraid to help educate your care providers and the medical professionals.
Yes, we definitely need it. We definitely need to be challenged. And the more you ask questions, the more we think.
Nice. Okay. So, this is another question for both of you. Cass, are gonna have to get out of here because Cass is famous. I don't know if you guys know, Cass is on a world tour. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But Cass is gonna have to get out here in a bit. But I wanted to ask this question for both of you guys. I feel like we've come a long way, right? Like for those who don't know, sickle cell was discovered over 100 years ago. It's been over 100 years since we've known about sickle cell. There's been a lot of research, but a lot of that research on sickle cell has really gone to benefit other illnesses. And so as far as we've come, we haven't necessarily made the most progress. I think that progress is ramping up now with like the new therapies and the gene editing and new technology. But one thing that I found that I sort of will always respect Ironwood Pharmaceuticals for this is that they brought in, when they were getting ready to try to come up with therapies for sickle cell and to really focus on treatment for sickle cell. This is about 10 years ago. They brought in a group of advocates and they said, we talked about a number of things, but the main thing was, what do you guys want? Like, what do you want to see? What do you want us to focus on, right? Like, this is what we think the top 3 things that we should be focusing on, but what do you guys think? And luckily they did, because it was completely different than the list that they had. But Cass, as somebody who is very much in the advocacy space, doing the damn thing there, and then Dr. Sehl, somebody who's involved in research as well as clinical trials and seeing patients, what do you guys hope to see for the future of sickle cell in terms of research, treatment, but then also advocacy? What are some of your goals, or what's at least one thing that you're hoping we'll see, or that you're hoping will change, that you're hoping will be different or maybe stronger? Any future goal that you sort of have for sickle cell in general, either like a sort of like a career one or just a personal one, anything like that? And either one of you guys, or Cass, let's start with you since we got to dip in a second.
Yeah. And endpoints are really important. And, it was really awesome of Ironwood and, these companies, kind of bringing in all multi-stakeholders, because then you can see the full picture. You can see what gaps there are, and you can see what priorities lay within, subsets of the community. My goal for the sickle cell community, I would say, is access. I think there's a lot of great therapies emerging, right? And we still haven't figured out, how, the oldest therapy there is for sickle cell, hydroxyurea. There's still so many people who don't know about it. And it's one thing, choosing not to take it, right? But not having that information, or finding out at 42 years old that this was even a thing, is unacceptable. And so I just want to make sure that people have accessibility to that information. And then, when these drugs do come out, drug development is half of the story. It's now providing access to it. And that's the other half. And so being very intentional about how what access looks like. These gene therapies right now, they cost a lot of money, but we're looking at models on how to get that through insurances and so on and so forth. So it's great. Drug development is great, but also you have to think about access as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another huge major frustration. I talked about the lack of social justice aspect or component, the fact that people a lot of times don't want to address it, or they kind of shy away from it, like the racial disparities and blah, blah, blah. But I think if you guys ever go, there's a sickle cell subreddit, and it is, I have a love-hate relationship with it, but I learned so much, and I hear so much from other sickle cell warriors that I never would. And some of the questions that they're asking, right, are like basic questions. And I'm not mad at them. I'm not frustrated at them. I'm frustrated at whoever the heck diagnosed them or is caring for them up to this point, that they don't know that a heating pad is a good remedy for pain crises. Why are you this age and you don't have the bare minimum basic information? And absolutely, I was in high school and I had a friend with sickle cell, my only lone friend with sickle cell, who didn't know about hydroxyurea, right? And was undergoing treatments that she really didn't need to be, like sort of experimental stuff, because her doctor hadn't told her about hydroxyurea. And I'm like, and it had already been out at that point. I had already, tried it and sort of been in part of an unofficial clinical trial for it as somebody who has SC type. And that was years before, and she didn't know about it. And it's so frustrating when our warriors don't have the information and the education they need. So you're saying access to the information, to the knowledge, to the therapies. This is kind of what it sounds like you're saying, Cass? Like that's the main thing you want to see more of, improved access for our warriors?
Absolutely. And you articulate it way better than I do. That's perfect.
No way. No. All right. So, Dr. Sehl, I'm going to ask you the same question. Like, what's something that you want to see? It can be more than one thing, but at least one thing that you want to see change, or new treatments or improvement, anything in that realm, any goals that you have. And then Cass, I know you got to dip, so you can stay as long as you want and dip whenever you're ready. I definitely appreciate you participating in the conversation today. So Dr. Sehl, what's one thing you got? A goal, change, wish, anything?
Yeah, I think I was listening to Cass and very inspired. I think our hopes are aligned, especially with access to care. And as patients are being approved and going through gene therapy, I think focusing on the quality of life. So we're learning more and more as patients go through gene therapy about the short-term effects and late-term effects and what persists. And as patients go through that, it's important to focus on side effects that they have, but also improving quality of life and physical functioning. And as patients are able to do more and have more time, more quality time at home and out of the hospital, that's the hope. And what can we do to improve that? And our program is young. It's something that was an idea for many years. For 30 years, Dr. Schiller was trying to advocate to start a sickle cell program at UCLA. And we have an infusion space that is open 7 days a week. We're currently sharing it with oncology, and we've been able to bring patients in for add-on infusions. But as our program grows, we want to advocate within the health system to make more dedicated spaces available, and at the same time make sure that patients have continued access to all the subspecialty care that is present at UCLA: pulmonology, gastroenterology, hepatology, and pain management, and palliative care as well, so that patients have access to all of these, and as well as ophthalmology and all of the things that are very important for prevention and improving quality care and quality of life.
Nice. That brings me to I would say it almost brings me back to I think what Cass was talking about in terms of access and sort of just being aware. Dr. Sehl, do you have any ideas about how we could sort of increase or improve awareness and education, right? Like, so the infusion center, or like one, I didn't know about that, right? And I tend to think that like I'm really on top of things, but there are a lot of things in general, whether it's certain therapies. I was actually talking to Kay Michelle, our live producer, about she's also a friend of mine, like, right? She's a close friend of mine, and we met in college, so we've known each other for a really long time. And just sort of lamenting about some of the frustrations and challenges that I have as a warrior. And one of her ideas was like, she's like, if I ever hit the lottery, we're gonna like create the best like facility for sickle cell. And I think actually that's a great idea, right? That's like a dream, right? Like this is the place you go to for top-notch sickle cell care. Everybody there is an expert and so forth and so on. And then I immediately think about like, oh, well, not everybody's not going to be able to access that, right? Like, what about the people who are too far from it? Or what about the people around the world? Or, and so I guess my question is always like, what can we be doing? What do we need to do to sort of increase awareness? Because initially I thought it was just, we need medical professionals to know. So maybe they need to start teaching about it more in medical school, or maybe they need to start, it needs to be its own section in like residency or something. That's what I was thinking initially, right? And then I come to find out, oh no, there are a lot of patients who don't know a lot. There are a lot of patients who don't fully understand the disease. Like, they know they have pain, they know they have this problem, but they don't fully understand it. Which means they don't always know the questions to ask or how to determine their triggers, or like little stuff like that, right? Things that like I can't stop thinking about. What are some things that we can do to sort of increase awareness and get to that point where we have improved accessibility for sickle cell in general?
Well, that's a very good question. I think it has to be like a multi-pronged approach. So there's education going on in the clinic visits, and sometimes the duration of the clinic visit isn't long enough to address or to make sure that a patient has everything, not only their questions answered, but additional educational. We have a wonderful program manager at UCLA Health, Smriti Ganasan, who joined us about a year ago, and she's been working on developing a welcome packet for patients so that they know coming in what is our flow of the clinic and what resources are available. So in addition to the infusion center, educating on a virtual pager system, what questions are appropriate for the pager versus the portal, and optimizing the flow through the clinic and how to interface. And then we have a dedicated social worker who really takes the time with patients, both before their visits, during their visits, and after the visits. She goes into the hospital when patients are there and makes sure they have all the resources that they need. And she also runs group sessions where I think that's not only educational from provider to patient, but also from patient to patient sharing. But those are available both in person and on Zoom. And then Dr. Ami Patel, who's a guest next week, really reaches out to the community and does educational sessions. She's part of the Cayenne Wellness, and they have conference that goes on where there's a lot of education. And recently she attended a sickle cell meeting at Children's where she gave a talk about pain management, and both from the provider's perspective and from the patient perspective. And so I think it's community outreach and patient education is an extremely important part of building a sickle cell program, and reaching out to the community and letting them know what we have, so that patients aren't bouncing from emergency room to emergency room and not having a home. Patients who've come through UCLA over the past 15 years or so have made comments about places they used to be, like Atlanta or other sickle cell programs that are large and well-structured and well-funded. So I've taken little pearls of things that patients have told me. When I was in Atlanta, when I had a crisis, I just came in and everything was ready for me. And so I've tried to take everything that I've learned from patients and put it as a goal in our health system, which is still a work in progress.
Yeah, that's beautiful though. I think that explains a lot. I think that explains the experience that I've had, at UCLA so far. Because again, I'm not sure. I don't think you had joined yet, but I was telling Cass, I went from Children's, and then I went to New Orleans, and I had like a good decade of not having the best care and really feeling like I was on my own in staying alive. And I kept probably not the best, a doctor who was ready for retirement and retired not too long after. I kept that doctor for the longest because I just didn't think that there was better, right? And I would literally travel from LA, from Southern California to the Bay when I felt like a crisis was coming or something was getting serious. And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to handle this at home. I would usually fly. It's like a 45-minute flight. And I would fly there because I knew the hospitals there where I could get care. It was consistent. Again, I didn't like bouncing from ER to ER, and the ones here near me, they never wanted to treat me. Didn't matter what my doctor was saying, right? And so I'm so grateful that I found UCLA, and I found Dr. Patel, and I found you and Dr. Max, who does pain management, because I just wasn't expecting it, right? It really is pretty rare to speak. And what you said about listening to patients and taking little pearls of wisdom and trying to increase the education, it's so important, and it makes a lot of sense. It really explains why you guys are doing things so much better than most of, I think, the facilities and places in the U.S., at least from the responses and feedback that I'm hearing within the community. And I think that the communication part is possibly the most important part. I don't know if it's just me. So sometimes, as somebody who's also autistic, right, I can be very confused about, is it just me not understanding this? Is this like a me thing, or is this like, this is just unclear, right? Like, or I'm not really sure what to do, or do I page the doctor for this, or do I just wait, or maybe I should just send a message in my chart, or, you know, like I can be very like confused, and I'm like, is it me? Am I tripping, or is the communication not great? And I think that that's something that a lot of I've since sort of come to find out that's something that a lot of patients deal with, but really don't always speak up about. And so the fact that you guys have somebody who's making sure they handle that communication piece, I think that really speaks volumes. It really does. And again, I think it really explains why you guys are doing things so much better than a lot of places. I always tell people, I don't know how long I've been saying this, but I always say, like, managing my chronic illness, managing my sickle cell is like having a part-time job, because I'm putting in at minimum 20 hours a week, you know, whether it's making appointments or talking to doctors or asking questions or getting my refills or going to the pharmacy, or like all the little things that I think a lot of people don't think about. I'm putting in at minimum 20 hours a week, right, on top of whatever else I'm doing in life. And so a lot of that is because I'm so proactive. But I also, there are a lot of people who have crises far more frequently than I do, who have far more complications than I do, right? And so I can imagine them just like not having the extra spoons, not having the extra time, not having the extra energy to be very proactive, to go the extra mile. And so to have somebody there that's sort of like bridging the gap, or is really on top of that, I think is really, really important. Okay, so I would love to get into, we got a couple more minutes, and as we wrap up here, we talked about some of the goals that you have in terms of accessibility and increased awareness and education. What's one thing that feels like far out, maybe it feels idealistic, unreasonable, like the unicorn, ideal, utopia, dream world of medicine, right? Like we maybe we have universal health care and everybody had the same access, and like in that world, if we had that world, like if we could envision the world that we want and that we feel like we deserve, and take however much time you need to think about this, or I don't know if you already know off the top of your head, but what's at least one thing that's like your just big, like on the top of your wish list, like either in terms of your career, something that you want to accomplish. You know, it could be anything, small, big. You want a certain type of treatment, or you want a certain facility, or you want a certain role established, or something even bigger than that, right? Like whatever it is, your absolute dream for your career, for U.S. healthcare in general, for sickle cell specifically. It can be anything. What would that be for you? What's that look like? Tell us about that.
Well, I think you named it. Universal health care would be wonderful. You know, all the time we spend arguing with insurance companies is worth it if the patients get what they need. But this may sound like a simple wish, but one thing I'd really like is for patients to have everything they need to get the simple things done, the preventive care. So vaccines is one of the things that really changed the lifespan for people living with sickle cell in the past 100 years since it was first described. The molecular change was first described. And so, I mean, I think it's very fitting that Linus Pauling described the change, the structural change in the hemoglobin just before DNA structure was discovered. And now it's been so many years since then. And this is one of the first conditions that is being treated successfully with gene therapy. But the simple things like getting to an eye doctor. So sometimes, you know, I'll say it, I'll recommend it, I'll put in a referral, then the insurance authorization team needs to work on it. There may be some obstacles there. Then, you know, whenever that's completed, the patient needs to remember, oh, I said you need to see your eye doctor twice a year, and then make that appointment. Maybe then they'll be scheduled 3 months out. So if we had, you know, not only universal healthcare for all, but also checks and balances where, you know, the reminders are there to make sure a patient, I think in the pediatric world, the providers are very in tune to making sure the children get everything they need, and they will come back and remind them and again, and remind them, you didn't show up for your dental visit, or you know, whereas an adult, hematology, we put all of that onto the patient, whether they're a cancer patient or a sickle cell patient. The patients are having it all on their shoulders to make sure that all of these pieces get done so that their care can be optimized. But that it sounds like something simple, but that's the most important thing for patients, not just have someone making sure all of these preventive care treatments get done. And it's surprisingly challenging, even though in theory it sounds doable.
Yeah, so I kind of want to add some context to why it probably sounds simple, but is really actually very challenging, even for somebody like me who's like on the spectrum, and I live my life by routine, and I always have, right? I'm like very regimented. I've got a spreadsheet for everything, right? And it still can be challenging, but it's because sickle cell, at least this is my opinion, you could kind of tell me if I'm off base or what you think, but I think it's because sickle cell is so complex, right? And we see so many specialists, and there's so many different things, and I remember sitting with Dr. Q one day, and I was sort of just talking about like this thing that I do with my eyes. It was like a playground trick that I used to do. I was like, my eyes shake sometimes, and this happens, and I see these floaters, and I'm just kind of talking, thinking this is kind of normal, because sometimes you don't know what's normal and what's not, right? And he's like, wait, excuse me, what? And he asked for some more information. He says, okay, you need to go see a retina specialist now, right? And it was then that I started to realize, like, oh, this is going to be far more complex than I realized. And so I brought up this infographic. It's not exactly what I need, but it's the closest thing that I can think about of the different specialists you might have to see with sickle cell. So I think for the average person, you're going to see maybe your primary care physician, and that's about it. And then if something comes up, or you get diagnosed with something, or there's a complication, maybe you go see a particular specialist, maybe the orthopedic specialist, or maybe a cardiac. Like you might have a couple of specialists, right? With sickle cell, I mean, just the other day, I think it was yesterday, the day before, I Googled like list of specialists, and I was just looking at which ones do I see on a regular basis, which ones have I had to see. And I think it was like all of them except maybe 4. Like one was like neonatal, because like for pregnant patients, but I mean, ophthalmologist, and I see an optometrist already, right? And the ophthalmologist has to be like a retina specialist. They need to understand sickle cell retinopathy, right? So you can't necessarily just see any old ophthalmologist sometimes. And then like a pulmonologist, or and of course now I can't even think about them, right? But like there's all these different specialists that you need to see. You need to be able to manage that. First, you got to find them, right? Like if you don't go to a doctor or a primary care doctor or whoever who can just refer you to somebody, or if your insurance is kind of finicky and they only let you see this person, or this person's in network and not in, you have to deal with that. Find the specialist, then make an appointment. Hopefully you get one in a decent time frame, right? Get your appointment, make sure you remember that, or put it on your calendar, get to the appointment and follow up, and then do, like, it's just so much. And that's why I tell people it's like having a part-time job at the very least. And so I think on the outside, or when you say, when we talk about sickle cell sort of like in the most simple terms, yeah, exactly what you said. It can seem really simple, but it can actually be surprisingly very challenging. Not surprising for me, but I think for most people who don't live the life or don't experience it, or aren't a caregiver to somebody who has it, it can be very challenging. So that, I think that makes a lot of sense. In so many ways, I wish I had a personal assistant, but not necessarily for my work, but for my personal life. Like somebody who could just make sure I don't miss an appointment. The past 18 months, I was actually just doing the math. I've had at least one medical thing every single week for the last, it's been over 18 months, but at least for the last 18 months, right? That means either a doctor appointment or go to the pharmacist. And for me, that can be sometimes a 2-hour drive with traffic to get to the UCLA pharmacy. And it wasn't until a few weeks ago where I had a week where there was no appointments on my calendar. And I thought for sure, I was like, oh my God, I missed something. I missed the point. And I start panicking, right? And I'm looking at my chart and I'm like, I don't have anything. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I was like, because my life is sort of, it revolves around whatever I'm doing medically, right? I need to make sure my appointments, that if it's too early in the morning, I might be staying up the night before, so that I make sure, okay, did I shower? Did I, change the dressing for my Hickman line? Okay, is that ready? Do I have all of my paperwork that I need to bring? Do I need to bring paperwork? Okay, no, I think I'm good. How long is it going to take me to get there? Do I have the right address? Do I have the directions? Okay, cool. Like it is so much to think about. And again, I am aware, now that like some part of this has to do with me being autistic. I get that. But it's not that much different for the average person if you're really on top of your care. And so that makes a lot of sense. I think that makes a lot. I think think outcomes, I think patient care overall would be so much better if we sort of had that, if we all had like personal assistants that helped us manage our care. One of the reasons I stepped away from sickle cell advocacy, or I took a break, is because I lost a friend, and that was sort of like my breaking point. We had lost warriors in the past, right? Like this person passes, and then you do this thing on social media where you have this memorial and everybody's in mourning. And when I lost that friend, it hit me in a way I didn't expect. And I realized like I was just dealing with compassion fatigue. I was tired. I was exhausted. And it's not just because I lost a friend. It's because too often we're losing warriors when we don't have to. Like we're losing warriors to preventable complications, right? Like if they had maybe just done this, or if the doctor had known about this, or if maybe they had taken care of themselves in this way, but they were doing the best they can because they can't work full time because they're always sick. And so they're housing this, or it's all these little things that I'm like, this should not be happening in the US. Like what's going on? Like we are losing people in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And like, it's maddening. And I just realized like I was about to scream, and I was like, I gotta take a break or I'm going to lose it. And so that makes a lot of sense what you just said, universal healthcare, but then also allowing like, or helping patients and warriors better manage the little things, the sort of seemingly mundane, seemingly simple parts of managing your health and managing a chronic illness like sickle cell.
Yeah, because we know that they work. These are the things that have a big impact as long as they get done. And it always it builds up when you know when you realize, oh, you know, the thing that I wished for 3 months ago hasn't yet gotten done, and then what were the obstacles along the way? So we're really trying to you know, organize the program so that there's we have a dedicated schedule and an authorization team that will make a list and reach out to the patient. And, you know, the first step is sort of documenting for each patient, for each appointment, what was an obstacle. Were you in the hospital? Were you unable to get time off from work? And there could be a number of things. Did you just forget? You know, for oncology patients, they often have chemo brain, and so having that support and you know, having someone remind them again, you know, even though we're all adults and we're responsible for making sure, you know, having that little bit of extra help in organization and making sure things happen is critical. So
okay, gotcha. So that actually brings up my last two questions. It's your response is funny because it brings up my last two questions before we get out of here. I'm trying to figure out which one first. Okay, so I know what we're gonna do. So speaking of cancer, we have long since, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but for as long as I've been within the sickle cell community, the advocacy space, we have constantly compared what's happening with sickle cell to what happens with cancer, right? And I think there's a number of reasons that we do that. And I think some valid reasons and some maybe like not fair reasons, but and when that was brought up, I kind of like, what's the best way to word this? I kind of stopped the comparison for a while because I was like, okay, maybe the comparison is not fair. Like they are two different things. But then something happened. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And this was still when my doctors were in the Bay. I think this was not too long after COVID, maybe it was something. I don't know. But I was in the Bay for an extended time, and she was diagnosed, and we were going to the same hospital, right? And we had this exact same doctor because it's a hematologist-oncologist, right? We had the same insurance. We were going to the same hospital. We had the same doctor. And like I said, my mom has been very involved. I think the best thing about my mom as a parent, right? Like I think like all parents are flawed, blah, blah, blah. But the best thing about my mom is her advocacy, right? Like it's like her vigorous advocacy of me, but then in the community in general. I was just telling Cass, like, I think she's more involved in the sickle cell community than I am. So she's very aware. For context, until I was late 20s, I had never been in the hospital by myself. My mom didn't let me. She was working full time. She would go to work at 4 a.m. But the moment I got sick, the moment I had to be in the hospital, she took off work. And I understand that like there's some class privilege at play there, right? So I was never in the hospital by myself, never. And I'm just sort of giving context for just the type of advocate and that my mom is. So when she's diagnosed and we're going to the same hospital, we have the same doctor, same hematologist-oncologist, she's very aware of the difference in treatment. And so she's the one that starts to compare and say, like, wait a minute, I'm getting treated very differently than what I'm used to with you. What's happening here, right? And it was so much so that like she got a call from her doctor one day. We're sitting in the living room. Her doctor's asking her, this is after I think her surgery, and her doctor's asking her, do you have your pain meds? Are you good on pain meds? Like, where are you? And she's like, no, I'm good. I still have a few left. And he's like, well, maybe I should send in another script in case you need one. And I was like, what? Like, what? Like, what are you saying right now? Like, so, because for anybody who knows, when you have sickle cell, it can be difficult to get pain meds. I have so much anxiety around it. It's anyways. And so that's just like one example, but even the care in the hospital and like all of the resources that were just thrust upon her the moment she was diagnosed, right? Like, there's this organization, there's this, and they do this, and then you can have this, and then you can have it. And it was to the point where she was a little bit overwhelmed because of just the amount of resources, the amount of care, the way that medical professionals and people like rallied around her. And I think it would be easy to sort of say, well, she went to a better hospital, or she went, she had better doctors. But we were dealing with the same hospital, same doctors, same medical team. Why is the treatment so different? What is going on here? I don't know if you can speak to that at all. And perhaps like if you've seen that, or like what are some things that like we can do? What are some things that need to change, especially as somebody who works in both spaces?
Yeah, it's a really striking story, and I have experienced that with patients who have family members who are on the oncology side, and it's hurtful when that happens, for sure. I think generally speaking, for both malignancies and non-malignant hematology, there is a reluctance a lot of times from in the general medicine and medicine subspecialties to get involved, or to say, I don't know how to take care of a patient with cancer. I don't know how to take care of a patient with hemophilia or sickle cell, because it's kind of a hard thing to come into that space where someone is suffering so much and dealing with end of life, dealing with horrible pain, particularly when it's something that someone's lived their whole life with. You never know when a crisis is going to hit you, and you're going to be in this excruciating pain. It's hard for people to enter into that space. I think, in oncology, a lot of times when we see someone who's recently been given horrible news, sometimes we'll come out of the room and say, oh man, that's the nicest person. Why does cancer always happen to the nicest people? And, and it's really, I think that's just our way of coping with the tragedy that's happening. And similarly with sickle cell, you see someone who's in so much pain. It's hard to imagine going through life where you're walking along trying to do something, make progress on a project, and then all of a sudden you're devastated with horrible, excruciating pain. So I think both are hard, and you're right. It's hard to compare. I mean, I think with cancer, for the most part, someone's led a healthy life, and they're faced with the end of their life. Whereas with sickle cell, some patients may have suffered more as children than adults, and they finally have a handle on it. Some patients may have sailed through childhood and now are becoming, struggling more and more. So it's important to get to know a patient very well and their what their childhood was like, to be able to help them through, crises and chronic pain and all the contributors to pain.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's difficult to compare, because I don't think it's an easy one-to-one comparison, right? Like I can't really imagine what cancer is like. Like if I'm being honest, like I don't even fully understand cancer, right? Like I know it's a thing that has wrecked a lot of my family members, but I don't fully understand it. I know that it can be painful, but I'm not really sure how or why, right? Like I get it, and I imagine it's the same thing with sickle cell from other people. And I think there are a lot of reasons that like the comparison can be just not quite adequate, right? Like even, I had the same doctor who said like, I'm not comfortable treating a sickle cell patient. It was really commenting on the amount of medication that I like, pain medication that I take, like the dosage, but also the quantity. And was like, well, I have cancer patients that don't even need that much. And I immediately was like, what does that have to do with me? Right? Like, because in my mind, I'm like, well, I know sickle cell patients who take way more, way stronger, and I know some who take less. And also, like my mom's experience was, I was just really thrown off by the comparison. But then also, like you have to add in the fact that like I've been taking pain medicine since I was a kid, and so there's going to be like a level of tolerance, and so like all these things that I was just like, I'm confused about the comparison. But I think in some ways, like I needed that. Like I needed her to say that so I could be like, oh yeah, okay. So the comparison, it doesn't always work. Like maybe let's like be mindful of that. But I think one of the reasons that we do it is it, and I'm just speaking based on the conversations that I've heard, been a part of, the comments that I see from members in the community. It's like when you see somebody who like imagine you see a kid and they get all of this for Christmas, right? And you're like, wait a minute, how come they get all the Christmas gifts? I'm confused. Like I only got this Christmas gift. Like what's going on, right? And that might not be the best comparison. I didn't celebrate Christmas growing up, but that's like the best one I can think of, where you sort of see cancer as this like universal bad that everybody understands, even if you don't fully understand cancer. It's a bad thing. It's something that you don't necessarily cause. That's not necessarily your fault, right? So I think it's an easy comparison to make because you kind of can see such stark differences. But having said that, so last question, again, unless you have something that you want to say or share, what do you need? And what I mean by that is we've talked a bit about your goals and some of like your hopes for the future of medicine, universal health care, or even like the sickle cell program at UCLA, or but for somebody listening to this who's like, oh, I didn't know this was happening. Like I kind of knew about sickle cell, but I didn't know about all that. Or, oh, I didn't know that you needed this. Or like what's a lot of times we hear these things and then we think, oh, we feel helpless. Like we feel like there's a thing that, what am I supposed to do about it? This seems like a really big problem. I don't know where to start. You can either answer from like that perspective, like what's something that people who hear this can do, or some sort of action step that even advocates or patients that we need to take. But really the root of the question is like, what do you need to get to the future that you want, to get to get your dreams and your hopes and goals for the future to come to fruition? What do you think you need? It can be a handful of things, it can be one thing, but like, what do you need to sort of like go from point A to point B?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So we've been lucky over the past 5 years as we've been building the program to have the support of two groups. One is the American Society of Hematology, and they have fostered or mentored us really to develop our sickle cell center and to keep it going and to keep the momentum going. They have a program that we just returned from in May, a sickle cell disease centers workshop. That's a week-long program to orient us and to support us as we build our center, and having monthly check-ins through the year. And the other organization that's been really formative in helping us grow our program is specific to California. So it's called NCSCC. It's Networking California for Sickle Cell Care, and they've been advocating for centers within the state of California, at sometimes university affiliated hospitals and other care centers across California. And They are sending out community-based organizations for advocacy, education within each center and providing funds. They are pushing every day on the California state government to fund and support the development of these centers. And the reason is it's such compelling statistics here in the state of California. People living with sickle cell live shorter than the national average. And our national average is, of course, our lifespan is shorter than in countries where there is, nationalized healthcare delivery systems.
Yep.
So why in California is it shorter? And we think it's because patients don't have a center or a home to go to, and they're getting fragmented care and going from one place to the next without getting their preventive care. So education, advocacy, and of course, spreading the word. We're working on marketing and reaching out, community outreach, so that people know we're here. And of course, working together with other centers within California and across the United States. There's a sickle cell organization called the National Alliance for Sickle Cell Centers that has a large registry where patients generously donate their data that is then pooled together, and you can ask research questions, and not only for interventions, but also observational and quality of life outcomes-based research that is very helpful to have that resource to answer those questions. So we compared sickle cell to cancer, but you can also compare it to something like cystic fibrosis, which is something that affects you your whole life from childhood to adulthood. And registries are things that have advanced the care. If you have a registry where you can state the problem, state the, quantify how many people are impacted by a certain health outcome, and then push on funders and government programs to help intervene, to provide access, that can be very helpful.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like what I hear you saying is, so of course the education and the informational piece, making sure that people have the information and that it's accessible. But then I think the other part is having people sort of like maybe participate or donate in terms of research. Is that because one, I didn't know about these databases or these registries, excuse me. And again, I'm always willing, but always kind of wary about trials and research and how much I participate and what I share and what I offer. But then a lot of times it requires me going and doing the homework and finding and discovering and learning and understanding, right? But I know that not all patients have the spoons to do that or have the extra bandwidth to do that. But it sounds like that might be helpful to get more, I guess, patients involved in research in that way, maybe.
Right. I mean, there's one aspect of research is allowing us to look at your chart, where that's one registry data. Another one would be is if we were to give you surveys or call you at home. That's sort of more labor intensive to fill out the survey. Yeah. And then, of course, another level would be a clinical trial where you're willing to do an intervention, whether that's a pill or an IV medication or an exercise intervention. That's more invasive than a survey and more invasive than letting us look at your chart. But these are all ways to advance science. And of course, with any clinical trial, whether it's observational or just looking at your chart or filling out surveys, there's no right or wrong in terms of participation. No one should ever feel pressured to
for sure
enter a clinical trial of any kind. But
absolutely. Okay, so I lied. Here's the last question. You mentioned, you spoke a little bit about funding. I'm not sure if I expected funding to be like the top of the list, like we need more money or whatever. But where are we in terms of funding? I know, when I was a child, there was a huge disparity in terms of funding for sickle cell in comparison to other things. And has that improved over the years? Is it better now? Is there still like a huge disparity? Are we good on funding? Does it depend? Where are we in terms of funding for research specifically for sickle cell?
I think that there has been improvement over the years. That's thanks to the advocacy of patients and family members and advocates. We have for specifically for gene therapy, we've been there's been funding from the NIH as well as the Stem Cell Center, the California Regenerative Medicine funding that has really helped advance that research. Unfortunately, across all scientific disciplines, we've been hit hard in recent weeks and months, and we just have to persevere because things have to get better. And so, it's really fun to come up with new research ideas, and you have to have a lot of persistence and optimism and hope to push it through through these tough times.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why I'm kind of like, we gotta weather the storm. We just gotta make it to the other side. That's kind of what I've been telling myself. Yeah. So speaking of clinical trials, I've gotten a couple of calls from the clinical trial coordinators because I missed a test. So I'm gonna go take care of that Monday, like while we were on stream. So I'm gonna go take care of that Monday. For those who don't know, this is like the first clinical trial that I've done in a long time. And again, I said it had a lot to do with the fact that I trust Dr. Sehl, and Dr. Patel was the one that suggested it, and I trust Dr. Sehl probably more than I trusted any of my sickle cell doctors. Besides Dr. Q in a while. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I appreciate you, Dr. Sehl, for coming on, for giving us all this wisdom, all this knowledge, and really updating me on everything happening in the world of sickle cell from advocacy to medicine. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right. I will see you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So, not me. What the heck? That was my fault. Krista, that was my bad. Okay. So we're going to get out of here. I'm actually kind of proud of myself. We stayed on time for the most part today. I thought I was going to have trouble with that because, again, this is a topic I could talk about in my sleep. And that, is very important to me, to say the least. And so I really appreciate everybody for participating. This will be up for replay. We might do a little bit of editing, but this will be up for replay. Thank you to Cass and Sickle Cell from Sickle Cell 101 for the work, not just here today, but for the work that she does for the community. She's done some major work. I mean, the number of times I've been able to pull resources, and again, inspiring the, you have Sickle Cell When project that I produced a few years ago for Ironwood. I really appreciate the work that Cass does. So thank you so much, Cass, for being part of this conversation today. Appreciate you. Hopefully I'm going to try to see if I can convince Cass to come back on next week, because I would really love her to be part of the conversation that we have with Dr. Patel, Dr. Amit Patel, and Dr. Max and Gemini, my bad. I'm gonna ask him again to say his name. He's got like 5 names. He's got like 4 names. But I'm looking forward to it, and I'm going to see if we can bring Cass back if she's got time. Like I said, y'all, she's famous and in high demand. And then I just want to thank Dr. Sehl for being part of this conversation. I learned a lot, and it is rare when I learn something that has to do with sickle cell. And that's for a couple reasons. It's not because I'm a genius or, I just know everything in the world. It's not that, but it's just because if it's Google alerts, I don't even need Google alerts. My Google alerts are other people, because I don't think that there's anybody in my life who doesn't know that I have sickle cell, which means anytime sickle cell is in the news, is in a headline, is mentioned, is on a TV show, if somebody mentions sickle cell, I get a text, I get a DM, I get something that says, hey, Cams, or hey, Smalls, did you see this? Did you hear this? And I would say like 70 to 80% of the time, yeah, I've heard about it, or I saw it, or, you know, I know about it. But there's every now and then it happens where I'm like, hey, I did not. Thanks for keeping me up to date and abreast of these things. And so that's why it's rare that like I'm learning or finding out new things about sickle cell, not because I'm so smart and because I'm just stay up to date on everything. It's because I have basically Google alerts in the form of people that know me and people that I know. And I'm very, very grateful for them. I'm immensely grateful. So I'm going to stop yapping. I'm going to get out of here. Last but not least, I got to thank Krista for helping us live produce this show. I was worried because, again, like I said, I got cocky and was like, I don't need a script. I don't need to run a show. I don't need to write anything down. I can do this on the top of my head. And then I kind of panicked and was like, maybe I can't, though. And so this ran as smoothly as it did, thanks to Krista. That is the only reason it ran as smoothly as it did. So, Krista, thank you for your help and your assistance. I deeply appreciate it. We're going to get on out of here, y'all. Join us next week. I think it's going to be next week, Wednesday, June 25th, for part 2 of this conversation. And see y'all then. Waheguru ji ka khalsa, Waheguru ji ki fateh. Peace, y'all.